ECW was a whole different breed of animal. It was completely different. Everything in WWF was PG. Everything was, well, actually, when I was leaving there, that it was PG. After I left is when they started getting really racy. But ECW was just a totally different product. It was more, I mean, hell, it was more extreme. It was more exciting, more electrifying, more energetic, more everything. There was just, it seemed like it had something that the WWF was lacking for both me and Chris. At that time, yeah, I was managing the Road Warriors, but other than that, they pretty much didn't know what to do with me because I had done it all to begin with. They couldn't put me with a lot of wrestlers to manage because basically a lot of the wrestlers didn't want me to be their manager because I got over more than they did. Like especially like the Godwins. Henry Godwin used to hate having to work with me because there they are as baby faces, and I'm going out and I'm getting the sunny chance, and he used to hate me for that. So there was a lot of wrestlers that really didn't even want me to be their manager because they knew the focus wasn't going to be on them. I mean, and I'm not saying that to sound cocky. I'm not saying that, to be conceited, but, it was the truth. If I was out there with wrestlers, focus was on me and not the match. So they were kind of at a loss of things for me to do. So they had me start modeling the Undertaker t-shirts and the, Stone Cold Steve Austin t-shirts, which I wanted to put a bullet in my head when they were having me do that. Cause what a waste of, my talent by just having me model t-shirts. Let Sable model the t-shirt. That's all she's good at anyway. She's good. She's very good at standing there and looking. But she's very good at standing there and looking pretty. Give me something to do. Get me on the microphone. Give me a TV show. Give me something. So I was pretty frustrated at that time, and this is actually another chapter of my book about my transition into ECW, and I call Paul Heyman the hypnotist because he could basically make you believe anything. Like he can make you believe that, the ocean is yellow and the sky is, rainbow colored and, with green polka dots. He can make you believe that. He's that good at manipulation. And at the time he told me and Chris, well, Chris was already there. After Chris wrote his To Vince, I Quit, Chris Candido, resignation slip. He convinced me that if I came there, I would get a better paycheck, a better salary, more royalties off of merchandise, creative control. I would not only be performing, but I'd be producing, directing and editing in the studio and for the TV show as well, and on pay-per-views, which is something that I always loved doing. I love being behind the scenes just as much as I like being in front of the camera. He promised me all these things, and so that's when I decided to go, make the move. And the way that I quit the WWF at the time is basically WWF would lend me out to ECW for pay-per-views for special appearances, and Paul Heyman convinced me to go on live ECW pay-per-view and say, "Screw the WWF, the ECW is my new home." Big mistake. Because I got home the next morning. When I flew home, I already had my release in my fax machine waiting for me from the WWF. I guess that's not the right way to quit a company, is to go on another company's live pay-per-view and say, God, yeah, I'm going here. But ECW was completely different. It was everybody was a family there. It was a very close-knit family. Everybody had each other's backs. Everybody looked out for each other. Everybody made sure that we all had good, solid matches. Everybody took pride in their work. Whereas a lot of guys in WWF, they'd be like, all right, we got 6 minutes on this show. All right, let's do as little as possible. I don't want to take any bumps. This is how like the morale was for some people at the time. Whereas ECW, they're like, all right, we got 6 minutes. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to make this work. We got to get this over. We have to bust our asses in the 6 minutes. So it was a completely different thing. And like I said, it was more of like, WWF, yeah, we were all friends. But in ECW, we were all family. Even if two guys didn't like each other for some personal reason, they still had each other's backs. Let's say if a fight would break out, if fans would attack somebody, the entire ECW locker room got behind everybody and defended each other because we were all brothers. We were all a family. The product at the time was phenomenal. I thought it was the best product on TV. I thought it was a better product than the WWF was putting out. And, it was a completely different animal. Like I said, eventually, of course, that ended up going downhill, which is another chapter in my book. I can't talk too much about that, but let's just say if there's anybody in the world I'd like to put a bullet between his eyes, it's Paul Heyman. And that's because he cost me $170,000. And that whole story is in the book, so you'll have to get the book to read that one.
But I mean, about ECW sometimes gets kind of pigeonholed as, oh, it's just guys with tables, it's just hardcore stuff. There's no real depth to it. Is it? What do you think about that? People that think like that, is that true?
Say it again.
ECW. Some people think it's just hardcore. It's just guys going through tables, guys hitting each other with chairs. Are people misunderstood about ECW?
Oh, it wasn't like that at all. I mean, of course, we had those elements on the show where we had the hardcore matches, we had table matches, we had, a lot of chairs, we had, a lot of, blood and things like that. But there was every single match on the show was completely different. We had our highly technical matches where you would have you would have, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero. You had a lot of really good, solid technical wrestlers. That's all they went out there did. You saw a complete amateur wrestling match at the time. Then you had Terry Funk. We had legends like Terry Funk come in all the time. Then you had your hardcore guys. You had Taz. You had Raven doing his crazy nonsense. And every match was actually different. So when you can't really label it as a hardcore company, because when you sat down, if you broke it down and watched every single match was completely different, and there was something for everybody on one of those shows. If somebody wanted to watch a hardcore bar world match, we had that. If somebody wanted to watch a technical match with a lot of suplexes and chain wrestling and ground wrestling, things like that, we had that. So it was a more complete product for a long time than the WWF even was, and WCW actually combined. It was probably one of the best products out there, but unfortunately, he kind of ran it into the ground, was spending more money than he was making, and that ended up being the demise of the company, which is really sad because it was a lot of fun working there. I loved watching the shows. Even when I wasn't working there, I was still in WWF. If I had off, I went to all the ECW shows with Chris just to watch because I loved being there and experiencing those shows. It was nothing like it. I mean, I don't know if anybody in this room had ever been to an ECW live show. Anyone? No. You missed out. Seriously, the electricity that went through that building was just nothing like you've ever felt before. And you can only experience it live too. You can watch it on DVD all you want, but to be there in that building live in that kind of an atmosphere was just incredible. And it's a shame that it went under. It really is a shame because it was such an amazing product.
How did you feel about the Tammy Lynn bitch character, the Dawn Marie thing?
Well, Dawn and I are very good friends. We always have been from day one that we met. We've been very, very good friends. The whole thing was, I was the baby face, they were the heels, so what better way than to mock the baby face? So, we had fun with it, and, I stripped her down to her underwear every single match, so... Luckily, I didn't go. See, well, I should say luckily I didn't get stripped because he asked me and I said no. And that's basically how that happened. That's the one thing. In 20 years of my career, I have always had the power to say no when I didn't want to do something, and it was respected. So, and Dawn didn't have that power. That's why she was always in her skivvies.
And then you would end up in WCW in 2000. And WCW at that point was kind of on its last legs. From what you hear, there's a new booker every week. How did you end up in WCW, and what do you remember your initial impressions being about getting into that company?
Well, our transition from ECW to WCW was mostly in part of the $170,000 that I'm saying that Paul Heyman cost me. Long story short, Chris and I had to sign off on $170,000 that Paul Heyman owed us to pay our Amex bill because Chris and I were the travel department. So we had $170,000. This is long story short. It's all in the book in the long story. Chris and I were the travel department, and every month we would book the entire company's plane tickets on our American Express bill. At the end of the month, we'd give them the receipts. We'd give them the bill. It was usually around $35,000. He'd cut us our check. We'd pay our American Express card, no problem. See, all the wrestlers had another office job because we were all trying to make the company work all together. So everybody pitched in a different way, not just in the ring. And we were the travel company because I'm really, really good at travel arrangements. So once we were not working for ECW anymore, this woman who worked for Paul used the same travel agent that I was using, and to make all these plane tickets, I just told her, just keep charging it to the card you've been charging it on. Even though we weren't working for the company anymore, all these tickets for months are being charged on our American Express bill. So we were trying to get a job with WCW, but we're still technically under contract with ECW, even though we weren't working and getting paid. And for 4 weeks in a row, we're at Nitro waiting to go out. Like, we're dressed, waiting to go out. And as soon as we're about to go out, a fax would come into the production office in WCW saying, oh, no, they're still under contract technically with ECW. They cannot work. We had to sign off on $170,000 of prom and sign off that we would not sue Paul Heyman for this money in order to get our releases to start working for WCW. And if we did not sign up on this money, and if we decided to sue Paul for this money, we were still under contract with ECW for 2 years, so we wouldn't have been able to work anywhere. So we had to swallow $170,000 because of that piece. But you'll read the whole long story of it in the book. And when you read it, you're going to be like, that man is.
So then WCW, another experience.
Another piece of shit.
So what was it like when you got there? What was the atmosphere like backstage WCW, and was there any big plans for you guys when you came in?
Kevin Nash was the booker at the time, so he was the one who brought us in. Easily the worst company I have ever worked for in my entire life. The morale was horrible. All the boys hated each other. Nobody was friends. Everybody walked around miserable. Everybody walked down staring at the floor instead of having conversations. In catering, not even one person would talk to each other, sitting across from each other having lunch. It was just a miserable, miserable atmosphere. And some of these guys were making ridiculous amounts of money because, they were getting paid by Ted Turner. And everybody was just miserable. Nothing they ever did made sense. For example, am I a wrestler? No. Have I ever said I'm a good wrestler? No, because I'm not. I actually suck at it. What are my strengths? The microphone. Give me a microphone. Let me cut a promo. Let me get get our angles and stuff over that way. So what does WCW do? They never let me get on the microphone, and they put me in the ring every night. What sense does that make? Seriously, I'm not a wrestler. I'm not any good at it. Never said I was. I can talk my ass off on a microphone. So put me in a company, put me in the ring every single night, and never let me talk. That makes a lot of sense. So you could tell that company was totally ass backwards. And no matter what you said to them, nothing mattered. It was their way or no way. So we were pretty miserable from day one when we got there. It was horrible.
That was actually what I was going to ask you about next. The part to make you wrestle. Did you ever harbor any desire to do it? To work?
What was that?
Did you ever want to wrestle at any point in your career? Did you
No,
ever? Never?
absolutely not.
Never.
I mean, I know what to do, and I can do it because, I was taught by Chris Candido from the day we met. I was 17 years old, and, we're rolling around wrestling. Cornette was my mentor. He taught me everything. Like, I can sit down, and I can plan out a match, move for move, for anybody. I have actually helped Terry Funk think of finishes for matches. Like, he's come to me, he's like, Tam, I'm stuck, and I have a mental block. I can't think of something. Help me think of the finish. And I'll be like, okay, just because I was raised that way, that I know what to do, and I'm very good with psychology, but don't put me in the ring and have me take bumps because I suck at it. Not only that, it doesn't feel good. It hurts. My body was not made for that kind of stuff. So never once did I ever want to be a wrestler. Keep me as a manager, keep me hosting shows, keep me on a microphone, let me smile for pictures, and I'm good. I've always kind of described my job as fluff, and as long as I can get by doing my fluff very well, so be it. But I've never wanted to be a wrestler, and thank God I never really had to do it on a full-time basis because I'm just not cut out for it. See, I can humble myself and say I'm not good at something. People always say, oh, Sunny's a conceited bitch. She thinks she's so great at everything. No, I'm telling you right now, I suck at wrestling.